The work of hope is because there's a community of Latinas and other stakeholders and other allies that understand that you have to have Latinas in leadership positions to strengthen our democracy, to strengthen our economy. They get it. And we're all rolling up our sleeves to have the successes that we've had. I think the other challenge is that, okay, now that we've had these successes and we can celebrate them, what's next? How do we continue to have that conversation that is not one and done, is not one Latina on the US Supreme Court, is not one Latina on the California Supreme Court. It's the pipeline that we want to make sure that they're not by themselves. And I think that's how we can help each other. So leadership lesson number one is responsibility is shared, but so is the kudos and the rewards. I would say the second leadership lesson that I always kind of keep to mind that motivates me is to be really true to yourself and not to forget what brought you to not to forget who brought you to the dance. So be very loyal, but also not to forget what motivated you. So for me, it's my mother's story. I was born in Puerto Rico. My mother was a single mother with my older sister, Helga, and she brought us over to Detroit, Michigan because I had a heart disease. I still do have a heart disease that needed special care. And she took it upon herself to be in a community where she had very little support, had to be at times dependent on a government system. And she also didn't speak the language. And she was a single mother back in the 1970s. It was a really different world. It continues to be a difficult world for single mothers. Seeing her, being a witness to her journey, the discrimination, the stereotypes that she had to face, the lack of opportunities given to her because of her accent, the little flexibility there was in the workplace for a single mom caring for a child. All those things shaped who I am. I always say it's not by accident that I ended up at a Latina-led organization, ensuring that there was opportunities being afforded to Latinas, that Latinas were prepared for these opportunities, and that we lift up those conversations and not be ashamed about where we come from, but really celebrate the heroic nature of so many of our parents and the journeys that they took us through.
Well, all of the hardships that your mother went through, and look where you've come. That is so instructive for all of us to really think about the long game and of hope in our country. And I love your long game. Your long game is I got to get the people early starting to get engaged so that ultimately they get on the Supreme Court. So, and it sounds like relationships are extremely important to you. Like it is not a transaction. This is something where you are building real relationships with people over many years. What does it take to get a Latina to actually decide she's going to run and then start taking action? How do you scaffold that for someone?
So a little bit it takes a network. It takes a group of people really coming together, and you always have to have that one courageous person that raises their hand and says, I'm going to be the pioneer. I'm going to go through and break that glass ceiling, or at least start carving out a pathway for us. So for an organization like Hope, we try to find who those pioneers are, who are those outliers, who are ready to break a new path or create a new path, and then create community around them so that they're supported. That is very much what the Hope Leadership Institute does. We demystify these pathways into government and to leadership positions. So we're saying, hey, these are the pathways. This is how you get involved. This is how you take the next level. Look also along the ways to these mentors that are part of the network that will be helpul to you.
So you almost have journey coaches sort of.
Yeah, we do.
And it's ready to pick up.
And it's very informal. Obviously it's always great when you have a formal system, but there's also a beauty about the informal system in the sense that people start identifying with each other, and that becomes a more solid relationship at times. So for Hope, it's really demystifying that pathway. Our leadership programs are all about, if we break it down for you, you're going to see how simple it really is, where the challenges are. You don't want to simplify it to, you don't want to not paint the accurate picture, but also give them resources of people to turn to support them. And that's really at the key of what the Hope Leadership Institute does. We are also, to your point, we do start early. We have the Hope Leadership Institute that's really for, a mid-career individual that's looking to advance her civic engagement. But we have a high school program, a college program, and then we have an executive program that really has this vision for the Americas to ensure that here we are in the Western Hemisphere, where the majority are Latinas, ¿verdad? So we should be thinking of our leadership not only at the local community, which is of course important, state and national, but we should be thinking it from a Western Hemisphere. What are we doing collectively as Latinas, especially Latinas executives? How are they supporting each other to ensure that there's a broader vision for Latina leadership? That's not just in the United States, but actually throughout Latin America as well.
We talked about the Supreme Court. When I think about Sonia Sotomayor, and she's being held up as the courageous one on that court today. She is the person who is is the integrity of the court. Is there something about her being Latina that you believe is particularly influencing her leadership on the Supreme Court?
I think her first generation story, the fact that, her mother also came from the island of Puerto Rico, her mother and her father, their story of struggle, of humble beginnings, of sacrifice, really in reading her autobiography, you just know that she was born for the fight. And what I mean, like in Puerto Rico in particular, but in the, in Spanish, you always call la lucha, you're always in for la lucha, you're always in, you're signing up for the fight. And I think that's just inside her. I think she knows, she experienced the injustices and she understands the system and how to work within the system to ensure that those injustices are being addressed. So someone that comes from that background, someone that understands the plight of our community is so essential to have at that leadership table. And I think that's what we can all do when we're at a leadership table, that we can make sure that our communities are being represented, because we have that insight of what that, if those are injustices or inequalities that are happening, and to come with solutions. That's what I love about Sonia Sotomayor, right? She's not just, she's not an instigator on the court. She's also saying this is another interpretation of the law that we should be looking at that's reflective of our society. So I think she's a great example of someone that's well prepared and that brings her credibility of not only through her education and her pedigree, but also brings her community to the table.
We all talk about how critical it is that you have diverse voices. And what you just architected for us is how her diverse voice is leading to innovation, new perspective, really reshaping. You have all one type of people, all with the same education, the same pathway, and you're not going to get that innovation or that evolution to this new world in 2022. You just mentioned some of the representing the sort of challenges or the barriers facing Latinos. What are the barriers facing Latinas today? What do you think are the most salient, critical things we need to be paying attention to?
So the economy and economics are very essential to the barriers, and it works across every leadership lens. So we talk a little bit about pedigree. If you don't have the economic means to not only move forward with a 4-year degree, but perhaps get additional training. We all know executives have tons of additional trainings and touch and a lot of opportunities. And a lot of those comes right out of their own pockets, or they're in networks in which they're getting scholarships or whatnot. So we have to make sure that Latinas are also afforded the same opportunities for those types of trainings that is affordable to them. So economics is a huge barrier. It also plays out in politics. It's very different when a wealthy individual raises their hand, says, "Oh, I'll run a campaign."
Oh, yeah.
And they really maybe have
I've
to
seen
call,
it.
yeah, right. And they only have to maybe call 5 friends who will give to the limit, and they'll call 5 friends. Well, our networks usually in the Latina community, we can all give $50 and then we can get another person get $50, but we're never going to compete with the amount of dollars that can be raised by others. So I think, we always have to revisit what wealth generation looks like in our community and understand that that is a key part of leadership, that we have to be mindful about how we give back. We have to be mindful how we're ensuring that we're building wealth in our community, and that we have to, ensure that we don't just say, oh, well, it's not all about money. No, it's not all about money. There's so many other things. But a barrier of money is real, and we need to discuss that.